thinking about Emancipation Day. Others might free the body. None but ourselves can free our mind. Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. This evening, we have a pinch hitter. Batter up for the game is on the line in the 10th inning, and we need to win. So we brought in the big hitter. This is Allyson Maynard Gibson, QC, to step in for the Renaissance Martin, who has been called to step away for a big thing. So this evening, we want you to stay tuned and listen to her as she gives us her perspective on emancipation, body, mind, and soul. We'll be right back.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. And what we imagine, we can achieve. Let's change the narrative 242. As I mentioned just now, this evening we have the huge hitter, Allyson Gibson Maynard QC. You know those people who have them extra letters behind their name? They're big hitters, big hitters. You know, you don't throw them no rinky-dinky curveball because that's out the fence. Welcome, Allyson. Can I call you that tonight? Because that's the only thing we know you.
We're family happy. We're family in many respects, of course.
Thank you. And
thank you for what the wonderful job that you're doing, reaching out in this wonderful mode that young people are attuned to and encouraging them to be aware of our history and importantly, to think. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for those words of confidence and encouragement. And so this evening, we want to dabble into this thought of emancipation and what it really means. We celebrated Emancipation Day yesterday, and there was a number of people on the beach, the most I've seen for the year. I don't know if that was a message that they were sending, but it tells us something. But we know you to be the dynamite person in politics, but people don't know a lot about you outside, possibly, maybe in the professional arena and the like. So give us a little snippet of what things that you like to do as hobbies and what makes you tick.
Thank you so much for that. As you said, I did have a life in politics after I was in private practice for quite a while, and I'm back in private practice. But that's not really who I am. I am today a very, very happy grandmother, the grandmother of two lovely granddaughters, and I have our first grandson on the way.
Okay.
Say our first grandson because my husband and I, my husband Maxwell Gibson, is a businessman, and I am also the granddaughter of two dynamos. They're the real dynamos, really. And my mom, Nita Davis Cumberbatch, who was known as the Mother of Arts in the Bahamas, and Georgiana Kathleen Simonet, who is one of our suffragettes. And my mother, who was always very quiet, you remember my mom, happy, I'm sure.
Yes. Very much.
She actually, many firsts behind her name. She served in the war. She was a part of the ATS, Auxiliary Territorial Service. She was the first female juror in the Bahamas, as well as being, we traveled all over the world because of her career in the airline industry, then BOAC. And of course, she was also a wonderful wife and mother to my father, Sir Clement Maynard, who was the Minister of Tourism, one of his many ministries, and the Deputy Prime Minister of our country. So, and I guess some of the things I like to do, I'm an avid reader. I love to travel, and I love to swim and jog, and I love music.
Awesome. Well, I think there's a number of people out there who can connect with that, right? And
Hope
so,
so.
yes, and be sure that journey that you have taken along the way is going to help us to understand this movement that we had since emancipation, that took us all the way back to the 1834 was the date that you had the act was not, it was in 1933, I think, 1833, but it took effect in September, if I recall correctly, of 1834, right? And so that act abolished slavery. And the Britannica defines slavery as the condition in which one human being owned by another. And so when we talk about owning, as we mentioned with baseball, we always talk about I own that pitcher, I hit him all over the place and stuff like that. And so people get this great feeling. But I don't know if people understand what it means that for somebody to own you 24/7, 365 days of the year. How do you interpret that?
I'd like to fast forward, really.
Okay.
And use examples. I'm going to just refer to two. The first is I'm going to give a quote from my father's book, Put On More Speed. I don't know if you can see it clearly. Put On More Speed. My late father's Allyson Maynard. He has a quote about majority rule and political independence that I think actually equally applies to Emancipation Day. Whether it's ownership, sense that you've spoken about, Happy, or owning your mind, freeing up your mind. But I'm going to give the quote. It's short. Majority rule and political independence, were achieved without shedding even a drop of blood. I can imagine no circumstance that will allow any of that marvelously daring experience to recur. Hence, younger generations cannot fully relate to the sometimes wistful, sometimes delightful feelings of achievement, the gratitude, the noble thoughts, the willing sacrifices, and the treasured memories of their elders of nearly forgotten days. They were not the experiences of sages, but of everyday men and women on a mission, brought together at the right time, in the right place, to play the right parts, to gain the right results, a great deal of good results. Now, I also the second person I want to quote is Dean Harry Bain. We are both Anglicans. We're both Anglicans. And in a sermon recently in the cathedral, he said that independence should be a whole lot more than drinking rum. And he said that we had to be careful, otherwise we would easily lose all that our forebears had sacrificed for us to become. I put those two together because those everyday men and women that my dad referred to, and forebears that Dean Harry and others refer to, were just ordinary men and women, everyday men and women on a mission to make sure that their children, and this can go all the way back to slavery, the dates that you were referring to just now, they were on a mission to make sure that their children would never have to suffer the indignities that they suffered. And they focused on how would their children become liberated. And the main thing that they focused on was education. And that is broadly teaching the children how to think and what should they think about and how do they feel about themselves. And that, Happy, is what you do on this show every week. So you are continuing this. We're standing in a legacy. We're part of a legacy. And you yourself have a noble legacy. I mean, the Dillets, talking about freeing up our country.
Right.
Okay. And so it's important for us to focus on that. to embrace it and to understand who we really are as a people, and make sure that we encourage our children to be aware, as you were doing, of who we are and what it takes to open your mind and to succeed.
Awesome. So those two quotes and those two persons actually, they're formidable persons in our society who paved the way, as you mentioned, for a lot. And the dean himself is still active on this way, doing what he needs to do.
Thank God.
And so far, yeah. And so, but when we look at the gap now between 1834 and 1973, that's some what's 139 years there, about some, yeah, about that. In the preamble and the speech from the acceptance to the UN by the Right Honorable Prime Minister, the preamble that we seem to like to push aside, the preamble to the Constitution of the Bahamas, that everybody says because it's not binding, it has no meaning. But I always grew up to understand it to be that sets the tone of the intent of the Constitution as so formulated, right? And so the preamble says that no man, woman, or child shall ever be slave, bondsman to anyone, or their labor exploited, or lives frustrated by deprivation, right? And so to me, to have that in the preamble, there had to be some mind things going on to say that abolition of slavery and bondage, etc., did not really disappear. It's not completely gone. So in the era of independence, what was it like by which the party that you was a part of, the government that came in, would have inherited, for lack of a better term?
I think it's really important to note that our independence order was signed by persons from both sides. Okay. We do know that historically that the Free National Movement said independence, but not now. But the reality is, at the end of the day, those men all signed the document.
Right.
So they all believed in the preamble and what's in that Constitution. And as you said, the preamble sets the tone. It really talks for the entire document. It talks about a constitution is almost like your DNA of a nation. And so it really sets out what we as a people believe in. And I go back, Happy, to the everyday men and women who, if we go back far enough, they all wanted the same thing. There was nothing political about it. They wanted a better way of life for their children. They did not want their children to be in bondage, to suffer from bondage, the deprivation that you've spoken about, the frustration that you've spoken about. It was very, very aspirational, and not just in their minds, and it still is today. Think about who we are. I call us Rhodes Scholars, Academy Award winners, Grammy Award winners, cultural giants, coding award winners for technology, NASA scientists. This is who we are as a people. And the people I'm talking about are people who look like you and me, Happy. So this is not something that's strange. Importantly, young boys and girls can look at a Desiree Cox, for example, or Anishka Bow. I think her name was Anishka, and Aisha Bow, who was NASA scientist, right? And say, listen, she can do it, I can do it. You see what I'm saying? And so let's not pretend that was past and that is something that is irrelevant. It is very relevant today. And as you say, it is embodied in the preamble to our Constitution. It's who we are. And that's what for the persons who were benefited from the abolition of slavery, that's what they wanted for subsequent generations. They were not obviously able to conceptualize a NASA scientist because we were not even to the moon yet. but the whole idea of freedom, freedom from bondage, freedom to live and walk in your God-given purpose. And we shouldn't squander that opportunity. I don't know, Happy, when you were doing one of your shows, you might go back to Dean Harry Bain's sermon at Majority Rule. I think it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
It was very, very deep sermon, going through the preamble and asking us whether or not we as a people were living up to our aims and our aspirations and our goals.
Yeah.
It's really important. People saw it as political, but it wasn't.
Right.
Because we talk about spiritual values, and those freedoms are, God wants us to be free. We are made in the image of God.
Yes, and that is hitting the nail right on the head as to what, when I conceptualize this show, what we want to be able to convey to the general public, and particularly our youth out there. Because
Exactly.
I mean, our youth is they're in an ideal environment where we are moving into the digital arena and the creative arena where they will thrive. But, if you don't have guidance, you could still go too far to the left or too far to the right. And I see the preamble and documents like that to be key. If we understand those, we will know it's our rudder, for lack of a better term. We like sailing. The rudder on the sailboat keeps you going where you want to go.
Right? It is all rather happy, but it's really also very important to continue to do what you're doing, to let our people, and we tend to be an oral people, to know who we are, tell the stories so that they understand. We can't blame our children for not understanding who Stephen Dillon is, for example, the first Black man elected to Parliament, and an educator, and by the way, a descendant, a nobility from Haiti, right? Let us start thinking about whether xenophobia is something that we want to be a part of in this country, So you're doing what I think that we all need to keep doing. So thank you for this.
You're welcome. And so, talking about that xenophobia, then when we look at the speech that the Honorable Sir Lyndon, well, he wouldn't have been Sir then, but it had been Lyndon Oscar Pinland, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas at the time, Commonwealth of the Bahamas, would have given at the UN when he was given the acceptance, when we were accepted into the UN and so forth. And a part of that speech says, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas subscribes to the concept of alignment of states having in common respect for human and spiritual values rooted in the belief in the absolutely indivisible freedom of the mind of man. And to me, you just tied that so well into everything else, what you were just mentioning and talking about with the xenophobia and maybe even religion. If you look at that, he's saying in here that we want a nation, or we are going to be a nation that's going to be aligned with all of these things. We don't suppress these things once our mind, we keep our minds in the right spot, being driven by spiritual and where do we go? Spiritual and human respect. So, you have any thoughts on the mindset behind when the Bahamas presented that?
Again, it's who we are. I mean, we say in our Constitution that we are a Christian nation, and that we are a nation that believes in spiritual values, right? And so, when people say, "Are we really a spiritual nation, a Christian nation," and all of that, just go back and look at that preamble, right? And yes. People sometimes backslide and so forth, but fundamentally, that's who we are. And that brings about concepts such as justice, such as you said, the absolute indivisible freedom of the mind of man, which is justice, which is a spiritual value. So it is something that we should not run away from. And when you study slave narratives, as you have, when you read about what motivated slaves and what drove them, there's a very strong Christian spiritual ethic. And that is what actually enabled our forebears to strive for freedom, to strive for something better, to maintain their sense of dignity and self-worth, to remain hopeful. And I really want to stress that word, hopeful, that they would, because of their belief and their faith, that life could be different and would be different. And that's why they were striving and working so hard. And that is what we are doing for the next generation. But it's important for us, like I said, again, I'm sorry that I'm repeating it, but it's so important. Do what you are doing, and that is to let our children know about their nobility, about their heritage, about their legacy, so that it can be for them a precious pearl that they preserve and sacrifice everything for and pass on to the next generation.
Right. And so as you talk about that, in those history books and the like, when the old story is told, it was always told that it was the spirituality in the persons who were stuck in the bottom of the boats, crossing the Atlantic and the like, and out in the fields, that kept them going, as you mentioned. And so from an emancipation point of view, I don't see anything needed on that side of the fence, but in terms of the physical and the body and the mind, I think we still have a long way to go, or some which ways to go. And from the physical point of view, based on these comments in these two documents that we referenced, but also there were some laws that were changed along the way. And I think in the 90s or so, there was the get rid of the chattel. That's how you pronounce it, chattel?
Yep.
Right. And so, and then you have things of the disabilities and women's rights and some other things that are not in play. I mean, how do you see us moving those along the way so that we could get fully physically emancipated?
That is really, really important. And the bishop, actually, Bishop Boyd, spoke about that this Sunday in his sermon. The importance of recognizing, you talk about emancipation, it isn't something that happened way back, as you say, in the 19th century, right? It's something that is continuing to happen today and that we have to work on every day. So you also spoke about the United Nations and what Sir Lyndon said when we became a member of the United Nations. We are, as a member, we have signed on to the treaty, I can't remember the exact words right now, but to do with disabilities, right? Empowering persons with disability. It's our obligation. It is our obligation to pass the laws, and not just pass them, because you have your granny may have said, paper could stay still and write anything on it, but enforce them also, because persons with disabilities have as much right as you and I, who we think that we don't have a disability, but who do you know who doesn't have a disability? We may not be sight impaired or hearing impaired, but a part of human existence is that. So we need to make sure that we know that everybody has this from God. And it is our obligation as a part of this journey to make sure that we put in place I want to say the regime, but the opportunity for everybody to bring their God-given gifts to the table and to develop them. And as you said also, that includes the reality that God created men and women, both. He created them equally. And so we as a people do have to think very seriously about whether we are going to continue the patently unfair and unequal treatment of women as opposed to Bahamian women as opposed to Bahamian men.
Right.
And happy, there are men and women who say, what more Bahamian women want? We got Bahamian women this and Bahamian women that. But even the Bahamian women who have succeeded, become the Governor General or the Chief Justice or President of the Court of Appeal and other Secretary to the Cabinet, the reality is they still do not have the same rights as the Bahamian man who maybe a sanitation worker, right? And we're both equal, obviously, but regarded differently in society because people point to the women who are up there with more you'll want. They don't have the equal rights. They cannot pass their citizenship on to their spouses in the same way that men cannot pass their citizenship on to their children in the same way that men can. And if we are going to develop our country, don't we want Bahamian men and women equally at the table, bringing their talents, bringing their... You think that Bahamian men love the Bahamas more than Bahamian women? No. And why? So why should we have half of the talent of our country at the table? We need everybody at the table as equals.
Yes, and I always say
women, persons who have disabilities, persons who have been in the Bahamas. If you've lived in the Bahamas for 20, 30, 40 years, don't you think you're as much Bahamian as you and I? They've been working here and been very productive here and had children here, a whole life here. Why should we deprive such a person becoming a citizen of our country? And they've actually made productive contributions to our society.
Yeah, yes, yeah. My view of a Bahamian is people who embrace and who indulge in the Bahamian culture and the way we do things. And once we are supporting that and growing that, then to me you're Bahamian. You might be a national, but you're Bahamian.
Building up our country, exactly.
Yes. So we talked a little bit now, and so that's the physical side. But I had some coaches who always say, don't focus on the minor things that you have that to make yourself better, that you might not be that good at. Focus on the things that you're really good at or what could cause you to have the biggest impact of becoming better or more productive. And so to me, right now, we are in a state where we are struggling mentally. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just maturity and all of the different things that is happening out there. And so when we look at emancipation from a maturity point of view, from a political or economical or even a social point of view, the way we look at things, the way we approach things, to me, that's all mental. How much more we need to go, or what do we need to do to have a different view? I look at COVID, for example, and just look at how we have managed the COVID environment, the discourse between the state and the people. And to me, that's not a physical issue. That's more of it can be a spiritual issue. So I'd say that more of a thing. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but just the idea of in terms of, are we really maximizing ourselves to get the maximum based on our attitudes towards each other?
I'd like to, those are great points. And thank you for putting them on the table. I'd like to go to another great Bahamian. And while over the past couple of weeks, the ZNS and other stations have featured great Bahamians, and one of them is Archdeacon William Thompson.
Yes, my godfather.
Okay, there you go, Uncle Willie, right? He spoke frequently about the need to be patient with ourselves. When he was alive, he would say, we're not yet 40. And the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before they went into the promised land. But although you had to be patient with yourself, he also spoke about the need for responsibility, discipline. He spoke about discipline incessantly. And I think that that word, can you think of anything that anybody can do happy and successful at? Whether it's a physical effort, a mental effort, a spiritual effort, can you be successful at it without discipline? You can't. And unfortunately, I think that as he pointed out, and elders continue to point out, I guess I'm in the elder category now, discipline is sometimes lacking, perhaps too frequently lacking in our society. And I think it's something that we need to focus on, because we are a great people. We are a great people. But without discipline, we'll never be able to fully develop the tremendous potential that we have. Just if I can give you a little example, think about the police talk about all the time how when Junkanoo season comes and plummets,
Yes.
young men and women, right from the places, the so-called hot spots of crime, are in the Junkanoo shack, making sure that their costumes are the best costumes when they get on bay. Now, they're doing art, music, engineering, design. You want me to continue?
No,
Order.
I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Okay.
I'm waiting for you so I could throw my little blow.
Environment. Discipline enables all of those disciplines to come together to produce this magnificent festival that people come back to the Bahamas every year for, Junkanoo.
So, on that same note, I can't let you sit in front of me now and not ask this question because we've been around for 48 years. And Junkanoo has been around before that. So, when we look at that and we can see the production, the constructive production that comes out of that era of time or window of time during the year, why, and it turns right into the mentality thing, why don't we see that we could apply that same scenario where we will put persons in positions and then highlight them when we praise them for their good works? And just like with the Junkanoo man going to Junkanoo and he performs his best, for that snippet of time, that whiff of time, why can't we see that as civic leaders, as political leaders, as clergy and the like, to boost the people all the time so that we could get the best out of the people? And that's part of the emancipation of the mind that I'm thinking that we are short changing our country on.
All I can answer that is an amen. I can't put it better than you just did. And I asked the same question. So all I can say is amen.
Yeah, but I can't let you just say amen on that, man. You sat around some tables, you have this nice fancy letters behind your name that gives you leeway to say some things that some people who might be on the ground can't say.
Well, I do think, there are people out there who are actually using Junkanoo as a medium to open our mind, as you were pointing out. Think of Arlene Nash Ferguson.
Yes.
Arlene Nash Ferguson has designed a curriculum to teach English and math and other subjects around Junkanoo, right? It would be lovely, actually. The Bible says a prophet is without honor in his own home, okay? Now, Arlene's curriculum is phenomenal, right? And I know, and you know, that if we adopted or even adapted her curriculum into our schools, that our young children would respond beautifully to it, okay? If we actually spent the energy, look at the success, for example, of Carnival, Bahamas Carnival, right? If we were creative enough, and the members of the Junkanoo community themselves, to actually find a way to commercialize this culture, not to destroy it. It doesn't take away from the fact that it is culture. And art is culture. People sell their paintings. Food is culture. People sell their food. Theater is culture. People pay to go to the theater. Artists want to be paid. Exactly. Okay. Dancers want to be paid and so forth. So commerce doesn't destroy culture. In fact, commerce can be used to enhance culture. I think we need to find ways in the Junkanoo community also. For me, and I'm born on the edge of the valley, and I was a member of the first Showtime Girls group in the valley, first out there. I think that we should let young people make more room for young people who have very avant-garde, enthusiastic ideas. You can't. Very few young people say why it can't be done.
Right.
man, let's do this. So I remember when we were, for example, with the Showtime girls, Paul Knowles brought us in. And the others, I won't call their names, were quite adamant that there would be no Showtime girls in Junkanoo because women brought bad luck to Junkanoo.
Oh boy, like climbing
But
tree.
look now what's happening. I was in my 20s then. Paul was in his 20s then. So by any definition, we were young. And that's what I'm saying. You really need to have that young blood bringing new ideas in and new ways of doing things. Otherwise, things get stagnant. So let's make some room in these environments for young blood and young ideas. And we don't not just make room. I want to remind young people that sometimes, like you just look at our politics and look at businesses and so forth, young people got to push old people aside and wait for your old people to make room for you.
Yeah. You know, and I talk to a lot of young people, maybe not as much as some other people, but what I gather is that they have a lot of pent-up creative ideas that they just need guidance or access in order to let that flow.
Yes. I also think, though, that I would add one more thing. The internet, this here, if things take too long, some of my grandbabies there, if they take too long, they don't want to read it. It's impatient. What now?
Right.
I think our young people need to get a whole more used to delayed gratification, which is a part of discipline. A seed has to be planted. It dies. It goes into the ground. It takes time to come out. It has to grow before it bears fruit. It doesn't happen instantaneously. Okay? And so our young people have to have a lot more, yes, push, be impatient, but also recognize that, hey, if you really believe in your idea, and you'll have many ideas, some will fail and some will succeed, be patient. Learn how to save. Every time you make a penny, don't go spend it. Reinvest your money in your business. Save some money so you could put some money down just to have a down payment on a home rather than paying rent.
Right.
Be like, I'll just tell this story. I remember when I was much younger, somebody was visiting. I studied abroad, and a friend was visiting abroad, and she said to me, "Why do you have all these dilapidated houses around the Bahamas?" Right? What she was referring to? How homes are being built brick by brick.
Right.
I said, those are not dilapidated homes. What people in the Bahamas do is actually on the weekends they paid a down payment on their land, and they and their buddies go down on the weekend and put some blocks down. Right? And so the time that it takes to lovingly build a house that becomes a home. Same thing with a business. Take your time to build. Look how long was your show popular overnight?
No.
You stick with
a lot of people on the show was, the people who,
you took time and you were prepared because you believe in the importance of what you're doing. Even if there was only one person listening, you were going to stick with this idea, and it is bearing the fruit that you knew that it would bear. That's the way that life is, and our young people have to really buy into that reality.
Yeah, and so that means that we need more people to be mentors for them to help them understand that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. And remember now, a mentor doesn't have to always be someone my age.
Right.
A mentor is a wise person who can actually show you what you need to do to be successful.
There you go. Very much so. Yeah. So we're coming up onto the break now. And so what I want to do is to ask this one question, and then we can go to the break and come back and so forth. And so the question I have is, are we innovating sufficiently to accommodate the rights and freedoms that is articulated in our Constitution? Are we creating those environments, those access, so that we could maximize those?
Are you asking me to answer that now or after the break?
No, you can answer that one, and then we go to the break. Yeah.
I can answer that right away and say no, N-O. And I'm not serious. Okay. I'm spending a lot of time right now at this stage of my life in the access to justice arena, internationally in particular. And I'm referring to that because We know that 1.5 billion people believe that the justice systems, this is around the world, is irrelevant to them. Their justice needs are not being met. Okay, and I'm referring to that in the context of innovation, because the foundation of societies is the justice system and the whole belief in access to justice, democracy. And if people don't even check for it because it is not meeting their needs, got a problem, a big, big problem. There are little things that can be done, including listening to people, being accountable, being transparent. By that, I mean giving people information, and not just anecdotal information, statistics, data, so that they can hold you accountable. They can hold the system accountable. And the system is supposed to serve our people, not just the justice system, all systems. And they're supposed to work together in serving our people. And it's just not happening. We know this.
Yes. Awesome. All right. So you've been listening to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. I'm here with Allyson Maynard Gibson, QC. I went to QC, but she have a QC. And so we will be right back after these short messages and support of our sponsors.
Sammy's Chicken. There's nothing like it.
I feel like I was just on another planet.
Welcome back to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We're having our lovely conversation this evening with Allyson Maynard Gibson, QC, one of my family members, giving us a wealth of information that we should ponder, consider, think about with intentional thought, and figure out how we're going to take it to make it work for us and the nation. Welcome back, Allyson.
Thank you, Happy. It's good to be here.
Great. So before the break, we talked about a lot of things, and particularly we started to touch on the mental side of emancipation and so forth. And so as we mentioned earlier, we talked about the preamble, talked about no man, no woman, or child shall ever be slave, bondsman to anyone, or their labors exploited, or lives frustrated by deprivation. So when we look at that, and we talk about this mental state, Marcus Garvey said in a speech, I think, he said that we are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery because whilst others might free our bodies, none but ourselves can free our mind. Our mind is your only ruler, sovereign. The man who is not able to develop and use his mind is bound to be a slave to another, to the other man who uses his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your grandmother was my mommy's piano teacher.
Okay.
And I think the stories that I've heard that your grandmother would have told my mom, and I think it was her and Clement Bethel who were considered her top students.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to always come to our house after school at a certain time, no matter what was happening. So that discipline that you talked about earlier was put in place from there, and they say water go downhill. So when I look at that framework that was put in place back then, when there used to be a village raising children, and they're like, how do we get back to the village? I'm not even going to ask if we have a village now, because when a man could blow his horn before the light changed green to tell me to go, and he's 4 cars back, it can't be a village. Right? How do we get back to that village state?
Well, that's a good. First of all, I think we have to want it, right? And I think that I go back to what Ashikin Thompson said, that we do have to be patient with ourselves,
mm-hmm.
and we have to recognize that the village that we speak about in terms of supporting each other and supporting each other's children and so forth, it's almost like cornflakes. The cornflakes box today looks very different from the cornflakes box 50, 30, 100 years ago,
mm-hmm.
okay? There's still cornflakes inside the box, okay? So we have to present it in a different way. And so it may well be that we're going to be connected to the village on the internet using today's tools, okay? Mm-hmm. I think this is something that we have to think about. You say something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
The question that you've asked is a very important one. It requires a lot of thought. We have to yearn to have that. And I think we have to take the time to tell stories. You ever notice that when we tell our children a story about whatever used to happen back when, or the grandparents tell it, they say, I didn't know that. And they want to know more about these stories. And we take things for granted. How are our children going to want the days when the neighbor you would go next to the next door neighbor to borrow a cup of sugar?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I can remember that, right? Or go to the fish market when it was where the straw market is now, and there were turtles swimming in it, and children could go and play and all of that, right? They don't know about it. So how could they understand why it is important in who we are right now? Mm-hmm. And if we can create that same kind of environment today in what they could become. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not just a few. There are people who are being raised who have created their own villages, and we see children excelling. Okay, look for example at the young girl who just finished winning the Scripps Spelling Bee.
Right.
Look at our young Seligman who
Right.
got to the finals, right? Look at right now the Olympics, our Bahamians who are in the semis and in the finals. You ask them, they got a village, right? You are successful when you have a village around. You can't do it. I can't say you can't do it, but I don't know too many people who do things like that on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, we want to make it bigger, like it used to be, and that requires. I don't want to put as high as think tanks,
Mm-hmm.
but thought and not just. In fact, I would move away from politicians.
Right.
Bottom up. Says
Mm-hmm.
the communities have to want their community to be a village. And then communities come together to build societies. Societies come together to build countries. Countries come together to build the United Nations, to build the world. So it really is bottom up as opposed to top down.
Right. Yeah, and that's a mentality itself, and so forth. So you mentioned the young people there. So my eldest son, Devon, since he's been back home, and when he was struggling to find a job, that he took up going to visit mom, and they just sit to the kitchen table and talk about whatever it was that was happening and the like. And so now that becomes a ritual. And so that's his new internet. You go backwards in time for internet, right? And she just downloads all kind of information and stories from him, about what happened for him, for his benefit to learn and how to move forward. But not everybody has access to that. So when we have these pods or the like, where we can have persons can do that, either in communities or in schools after school or the like. But the internet is all over. So how do we get books? Because I'm not one to read books from cover to cover, unfortunately. I never developed that habit. But if a book catches my fancy, I might read it cover to cover, but I will read it as a textbook. And, find sections of it, read. I might end up reading the whole book cover to cover, but not in one go. So that's my generation, which is in the middle. How do we now get the younger ones who you mentioned, who don't have that attention span, to tap into things that can get them to download information into their heads to be able to help them in their journeys forward?
Well,
go ahead.
First of all, I do think that I like your whole idea of community centers, or you call it pods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I also I'm a firm believer that the internet, it's a fountain, that's what I write with, pen and paper. That's the internet today. It's I say it's essential, and because it is essential, it should be free. I think that there needs to be places and communities where you go and the internet is free. Libraries, hotspots, just permeating our communities, because that is not the future, it's the now.
Right.
And we cannot expect our young people, whether it is, as you have said, learning about themselves and their history, or even young people want to be entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur online, getting information, giving information, selling goods, selling services, getting goods, getting services. The internet is necessary for that. So I think it's wrong. It is wrong to charge for it. I think that there should be, obviously, the providers are in the business of providing services. But if you look around the world, if I'm supplying businesses, I charge them for that. But schools should have free internet. Their libraries should have free internet. Certain community hotspots should have free internet. That's my view. And I think that makes a big difference also. You teach your young people how to download, or when you say something, you say something interesting in your show, while you're talking, they can go online and download and check and so forth and so on. It's important. We have to facilitate and encourage.
Right. And I struggle each week, because I like to give quotes, but I like to give quotes of people of Bahamian what I call Bahamian persons, and I struggle to find sources of people's work on quotes. And so maybe we've come to the time when persons like yourselves and those who might be in a different state of your journey to come together, and like you have the Les Browns and the like who might be motivational speakers, but people who will put their talks and stuff online so that people could tap into and get access to what's inside your heads, that, instead of trying to rewrite the wheel all over again themselves.
It's really interesting. You're stepping on my toes, because I'm the one who's always telling people like Sir Arthur Folks and Mr. Hanna and others, they got to write. And even if they don't write, record it, because their grandchildren will help them record it. And then they say to me, they throw to me, well, why aren't you doing it? And I don't think my story is particularly interesting. So I get the point that you're saying. And yes, people have to tell their stories. So if you go on Amazon, plenty of Bahamians are writing now, trust me. Well, it's good. Yeah. It's a good thing. It's really important.
That's good.
And not just writing, but also, like you say, download your presentations and so forth. YouTube it. I don't know how to do YouTube it. I think that's the right way of expressing it, but sort of easily accessible.
So now when we look at our whole mindset now, mindsets are normally how people look at other people. And I always say leaders, people follow people. And so who they follow is who becomes the leader, not the leader decide who the follower is. But we seem to be going in a backwards direction in the second half of our internal rule era, in terms of collectively, that is, not individually, because we've had some great leaders and we had some media, and it's always a balance. But when we look at the financial reports of the country, then it seems to tell me that we're going backwards, because part of leadership is to overcome the challenges that we have, or that we are faced with, right? When you hire somebody as CEO, you're not going to listen to them and say, oh, we had this or we had that, and that's why we gone here. Yeah, they have an impact, but the bottom line is you still want production. How do we get to that point where we could turn that table from going backwards or downhill to go back up?
If you look, leadership, you know that I spent a year at Harvard University in 2019. And one of my professors speaks about the leadership system. So the system being leaders, followers, and also the circumstances at the time, that whatever's happening, what's going on at the time, because that sets a context, okay? And if you look around the world today, in companies where CEOs have been made to resign because the so-called followers, meaning employees and shareholders, have been upset by one thing or another, and they've come together and they have insisted that that's not what they believe that the company does or should stand for.
Right.
And they forced the resignation of the CEO or the president of the company. I say that all to say that followers have a responsibility. So we, as citizens of this country, and I'm not putting this in as you are not doing, so neither am I, putting it in a political context at all. We have to decide, what is it that we want as a people for ourselves? What do we want for our children and grandchildren? And how do we want our country to be seen? It's up to us to stand for that. Don't look to the government and say it's the government's responsibility. It's our responsibility, and we have to take personal responsibility.
Right. Yes, very much so. And I'm a big bat swinger for that, in terms of having the people, the electorate, understand or elevate their attitude towards power. or authority, I should say, in the country, because we seem to always think that it's only every 5 years we can go to the poll, and that's after that our powers disappear, right? And
Well,
so forth.
I don't know whether everybody thinks that. It appears that way for sure, but don't underestimate the importance of the ability to actually make a decision every 5 years and to exercise your power every 5 years. It wasn't so long ago that people who look like you and me could not vote. So that's
No,
not that. So it's a very important power. But as Ashik and Thompson would have said, as we mature, let's recognize that it is our obligation to make important decisions about our lives every day, not just every 5 years. And as you would here today, continue to encourage our people and us to take personal responsibility and to continually examine who we are and what we stand for and how we're going to see that that happens in our society.
Yes. So, Madam QC, you've been traveling a lot recently, and you just came home and you came to the bat, up to the plate, and to me, you've hit a grand slam. So, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know you got those little ones that you want to go and play with some more, and also catch maybe a senior nap so that you can keep going. But tell us before we go. We talked a lot about the whole scope of emancipation and getting ourselves to the point. And yes, I always say to my friends that we're only 48, we're toddlers, and so we have a lot more to grow and so forth. And we're going to fail as we go. Failure is not a bad thing. We just need to fail fast so we get beyond the failure to the success. But tell us, what would you like to say to the general public? What would you like to see happen before you would somehow decide to go on to meet Peter?
We are looking towards our golden anniversary as an independent country.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that there is no greater country on earth than the Bahamas. And I'm not just saying that because I am Bahamian.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the natural beauty of our country. The Apollo astronauts, talking about this blue marble, the Earth, singled out the Bahamas. They can see the whole world. They single out, look at a globe, a dot, and they single it out. So we beat everybody in terms of natural beauty. We have the most Rhodes Scholars per capita than any country in the world. So we beat other countries in terms of intellectual capacity. I haven't done the math on gold medals, Olympic gold medals. Mm-hmm. At the time of our speaking, I don't believe our Shawnee has run a 400 yet, or Stephen Gardner done his 400 yet. And that, not just them, but go back to Tommy Robinson and before. Mm-hmm. How many countries have produced athletes like that? How many countries could produce Junkanoo, etc.? So I'm just saying that let's not underestimate who we are. You spoke about going back. We're not into that. Something to think about is 50th anniversary on the way. Mm-hmm. In the 21st century, how are we going to manifest to the world a 21st century Bahamas? What is that if we had to rewrite our constitution? And I'm not suggesting that we do, but it does need to be amended. It's a living document. Mm-hmm. So on a go-forward basis, maybe we need to have like fora, or some people say forums, but people come together. Remember before independence, they had an independence secretariat that prepared for the independence celebrations. So everything to do with the next 50 years. Mm-hmm. We need now to be talking about and preparing for putting in place and celebrating. Let's claim it already. Say what you plan, do it, and let people know that you did it. Right. And so that's what I say to Bahamas. Let's not forget that we are the greatest country on earth. We are the best minds, Rhodes Scholars, NASA scientists, etc., etc. Artists, ballet dancers, visual artists, Academy Award winners. We got this. We got this. Let's step it up even further. Let's innovate. Let's be strategic about how we do what we do, so that when Dale Happy Knowles' great-grandson is looking back in 90 years' time, he's going to say, look, my great-grandfather, when we were approaching our 50th anniversary, and when I say Dale Happy Knowles, I mean all the Dale Happy Knowles, all of us, because paved the way, set a vision, this whole excitement about who we are and how we're going to lift up our head to the rising sun and show the world that the road we're trotting is leading to our God, march on Bahama land. What does it mean for us for the next 50 years? Stop to think about, Dale Happy Knowles.
Yeah, I will think about it, and I'm sure with the support of some people out there, you will see some things coming soon that will take us to past the moon.
I claim them for you. I really do. And I'm very happy about what you're doing. I'm proud of you. And you got a rover on Mars right now. So you're right. Past the moon is exactly the way to be thinking. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Allyson Maynard Gibson, grandmothers, multiple times, I should say. Well, I already say that. You know, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you tonight. Hopefully we get beyond the COVID and we could be in the same room and just sit down and have the nice things. Say hello to all.
You've not let COVID keep you back. This enables you to take it out to the whole world. People are tuning in all over the world watching you. So you're setting the example of how not to let look at an obstacle as a bump in the road, man. We can like you say, failure is not an option here. We're gonna fall down, but we're gonna get up, and we're gonna get up and get up and do it again and succeed. So
yes, very much so. So you've been listening to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We've had our special guest this evening. It's Allyson Maynard Gibson, QC. No, I like to say that QC. I don't know why, but you sound good. So we're talking about emancipation, body, mind, and soul. You know, I say the three of those things are like the Trinity. And so when we get those in sync, there's nobody who could stop this Bahama land. We have everything in our favor. God lives here. If you look at the water, you got to know he lives here because, you know, it's just what it is. And so we would like to thank you out there for tuning in. If you want to become a friend of Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, shoot us a message inbox on Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever it is, and we'll get in contact with you and figure out how you want to assist, and we can go from strength to strength. Allyson, thank you very much. Say hello to Uncle Max for me.
I sure will.
We will be back next week, same place, same bat channel, with another.
Greetings to your wonderful mother.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, take care.
Join Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles as a friend and sponsor. Contact us at something2think242@gmail.com or WhatsApp us at 242-424-0257.